Excellent. All right, good evening and welcome to Inside the Outhouse for the 21st of June. My name is David Maskell. Tonight's host, Pete Smith, orator and founder, is in the field working busy with some university students tonight. I'm going to throw straight to Maddie for our acknowledgement of country.
Thanks, Dave. So let's all take a moment to show that we respect and honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and future. We acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on this land and commit to, inside the Outhouse, building a brighter future together. I personally am on Tanarong land tonight, and I would like to particularly pay my respects to Tanarong elders past, present and emerging. If all of you as well would like to have a look what country you guys are on tonight and then drop it in the chat, that would be great.
Excellent, thanks Mads. Tonight's burning question, and it's being talked about, I guess, a little bit in social media and maybe as a key topic from the recent OCA National Summit. Outdoor learning, where should I go? So tonight's topic sort of is focused a little bit on what are the options a little bit out there, uni, TAFE or an RTO type sector. And we've got a few burning questions, which I'll throw into the chat briefly. I'm going to call on Matt Cox. We reached out to a few people who were in lockdown a couple of weeks ago in Victoria, and Matthew was kind enough to say he'd kick us off tonight with a little bit of a brief introduction of who he is, where he's from, and what he's up to in that space at the moment, and then we'll go from there. So, if Matt, you feel good, I'll get out of your way.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Yeah, well, I know some of the faces out there, and yeah, some of the people are obviously new and from all over the world. So, can everyone hear me? Okay. Yep. You might just have to bear with me. I've got a very annoying dog in here with me at the moment, and he won't leave. So I'll eventually have to sort him out at some stage. But yeah, look, I work for Victoria University, for those of you who don't know. So obviously the tertiary higher education part of the education options in the outdoor sector. And I coordinate all of our outdoor education, outdoor leadership, adventure sports courses at Victoria University. I've been doing that for quite a while now. And I sort of, before I got into the tertiary sector, I worked in a lot of different areas in the outdoor industry, I suppose, or doing lots of various different things, but have ended up in the tertiary world, and I'm getting close to finishing my PhD at the moment. And my PhD is about how outdoor leaders develop professional identity. So I've kind of been thinking a lot about how that happens over the last couple of years, and I guess how that relates to tertiary education is I keep coming back to this concept of, the profession and the value of the profession. And I guess a quote that I read a long time ago in some of my reading around my PhD studies came from a researcher over in the US named Stephen Guthrie. And he had this really, I guess, profound quote for me about adventure leadership or adventure education leadership, and it was that we are not generally valued, recognised or supported by the public. And that kind of stuck with me as quite an important quote, because I was like, well, why is it? Why are we not valued? And he went on, and a lot of his research is around the developing profession as such. And so that kind of got me thinking a lot about the intersections between education and us as a developing profession, and what it is that we actually want to be or want to do. And I guess rather than me continuing to talk about this stuff, I might just sort of throw a question out there first to sort of gauge the room and see where people are at. But do we as the collective we want to actually be known as a profession? Like, what is it that we want to be known as? Because if we have an idea of what we want to be known as, then it will actually help decide where it is that we want to go, or what are the best pathways to actually get there. So maybe if I just throw that out there and say, you know, do we want to be known as a profession? Just get some thoughts from people there.
I think absolutely. I know that recently, like entering the field for the first time myself, I've struggled to explain to people the depth of the programs that like we run in this field. And essentially I always come back to like a more simplified version, because it can be really difficult to explain to people who are not in the field of like, oh, I take young people out like camping and hiking, cycling, canoeing, just because like it gets really, really hard. But I think if there was like maybe a greater understanding of, rather than just like the recreational side of things and lots of the other things that we can achieve in the outdoors from the greater public, might be a little bit different. So my vote's for yes for profession.
I would suggest that anyone that works in a school or a school-based outdoor education program would probably be familiar with describing their field as a profession rather than an industry, because teaching is known as a profession, not an industry. So I think school-based outdoor educators would probably be more familiar with using that term, profession.
I find one thing that always has stuck with me for years and years. I worked at a camp back in the States, and I remember I had a group there, a corporate group, and one of the gentlemen said something to me about how his daughter wanted to go into outdoor recreation, and he's like, and you know, that's not something you can do as a profession. That's not a lifetime job. And he was telling me this as that was what I had just chosen as my lifetime job was outdoor education. So that's always stuck with me. And, I told him then, I was like, actually, yes, you can make this a profession, and it can be, you can be successful in it. And so I definitely think it's a profession. When people ask me what I do, what's my career? My career is outdoor education, no matter what aspect of it I'm working in.
So is there any other thoughts from other people before I sort of keep moving on in this train of thinking?
Can I be devil's advocate on that one, Matt?
Yeah, go for it, Dom. That's
right. I reckon there's a real the biggest issue on this, and had this discussion I think in this environment before. The biggest issue is there's so many aspects to the outdoors that there's an absolute professional part of it, which is probably what Glenn said, the education aspect. There's no doubt it needs to be professional. It needs to be a profession, but there's also room for the non-professional aspects, and there's still careers and there's still legitimate working opportunities, but doesn't mean it has to be as a profession. So I think that's probably the big thing. If we're talking outdoor education practitioners, no doubt, I think that's where you need the professionalism. But there are other aspects of working in the outdoor sector where it needn't be actually under the professional banner.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you there, Dom, because obviously, we do have a lot of people that volunteer their services, whether it be at a community club, community sport level, that sort of stuff. Who may not sort of fit under that definition of a profession. But obviously too, if we're looking at, and I'm trying to wrap this up into the bigger picture discussion that's going on at the moment, that the OCA is sort of trying to tackle around how the industry fits together in terms of wages and educational pathways and those sorts of things. I guess another statement that I came across by the Australian Government Professional Standards Council, is that the public's perception of an occupational group is now a significant factor when it comes to whether this group is regarded as a profession. And I think that's where a lot of my thinking around the intersection between our educational requirements within the sector and where it is that we're trying to go with the sector is kind of all getting sort of mixed up, because it seems like the public perception is shaping where it is that we're at the moment. And I don't think we collectively like where it is that we're at the moment. So how are we going to shift and change the public perception about the outdoor sector? And one of the key ways to actually shift public perception is by increasing educational levels.
So Matthew, it's Graham from Green Frog in Brisbane here.
Hi, Graham.
Hey, how you going, mate? I totally agree with you there that the public perception of what we do in general, like Don was saying, in a general sense, is probably a little bit confused. And I think that professionalizing aspects of it is definitely where we need to go. And I think we do that by looking at, and as the other committees are doing, is looking at that wage brackets. But it's also how we also need to think about how do we change that perception of things like the school-based education programs and professional outfits. Like a lot of us are professional outfits, private outfits, not just school-based learning facilities. So there's that side to it too, and I 100% agree with what you're saying, and also what Glenn and Dom said. So I think we definitely need to look at how do we professionalize ourselves as a collective while still managing the expectations of the public about what we actually do for them.
I think we've also got to look at how different groups might look at the descriptive words we use for ourselves, or the overall group of people that are working in the outdoors. For instance, if we're trying to be seen as something that is worth funding and is worth the federal government looking at, the word industry, of course, is something that might appeal to public servants and governments. I'm just using that as a possible example. So we really need to sort of look at all the various words we might use for the outdoors and the various aspects of it, and make sure that they're resonating with the public, with the parents, with the potential students, but also with governments and agencies at various levels. So we've got to be fairly careful what we call ourselves and what words we use.
If I could jump in and bring the conversation, maybe it might be a salient point to the first question that we posed. Whether it's a university, a TAFE, or an RTO delivery platform, are any of those frameworks better or worse off for long-term employment and for bringing us to a point of professionalism? I know I got Ben Craddock from Chisholm TAFE has jumped in the room, and we invited him to speak on the topic as well tonight. So if you want to throw a perspective from TAFE's perspective, Ben, I'll throw you in the deep end then, and we'll just keep chewing through the conversation as we go.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm really not going to go a TAFE versus university. I think they've both got their pros and cons, so I'm not going to advocate TAFE over uni. I think they've both got their place. And look, in an ideal setting, I think it's probably both, a bit of both. TAFE, we're sort of aiming for that vocational training. We always have done it, and there's a big impact from industry experts in writing our training package or our framework of what our delivery is. Whereas I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the university professors there, that university is training for more theoretical thinking with a base level of practical knowledge and looking at that education background and potentially future jobs. So there's a different purpose there, and there's a lot of crossover. I think what we're looking at in the industry at the moment is a shortage that we're all trying to meet. So how we do that is trying to get the industry back on board, and for us, particularly the TAFE sector, is trying to find where we can fit how we can attract more of those students and how we can attract them long term. So in my head, an ideal setting would be attracting them through the TAFE system, getting practical training, and then having that established pathway into university while they're still working in the industry as well. That's probably a longer pathway. I'm not sure if Wally or the other crew there from the TAFEs have a different perspective of mine, but that's kind of where I'm fitting. I'm just trying to see how TAFE can come back in and fit and meet those demands as well.
I might throw to Glenn. He's put his hand up and has a comment, I think. And then maybe Aaron after him.
Yeah, I don't think it's better. It's just different. So TAFE in a shorter period of time probably gets people working in the outdoors more quickly, and university programs open different doors to work in schools or potentially in other sort of contexts. So I don't think it's appropriate to say one's better or worse. They just open different doors, and perhaps the salaries, by working for a school, you tend to be more guaranteed a higher salary. Maybe that makes it a bit more sustainable in the long term, but I don't think it exclusively has to do so.
Scott, you have a comment?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm still a student at USC actually with Glenn Thomas, and I've got a few friends that went through the TAFE pathway as well. And what my understanding from talking to them was that university has a little bit less superficial understanding of like the general areas. So when I talked to a few
You're on mute, Scott.
You're on the mute, Scott.
Is that better? Okay, thank you for that. I was saying that the TAFE courses that they've been in, they go to the areas and do their activities and programs and facilitate it. But university, like from what I've been taught, has a slightly more deeper understanding of the areas and teaches you more to look deep into the area instead of just going there to facilitate activities, if that makes sense. That's just what I've gained from a few conversations with some younger outdoor recreation people. Yeah.
Other comments, and I notice I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Sarab from India.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it. Right. So I'm also a student of Glenn, studied at La Trobe. Here in India, the situation is quite different, actually. We don't have a TAFE equivalent, and we don't have any university that teaches outdoor ed. We've got an older system in a sense. We've got mountaineering institutes because that was the big thing for India. And what's happening is that a lot of people graduate from those courses, which are typically anywhere between a month to 2 months long, and you could take multiple courses, but they go and work with people as opposed to being mountaineers. So there is no concept of child psychology, experiential ed coming in. There is one diploma program on experiential ed, and a lot of people who are actually here from India have gone through that program. So we actually need both the things, the TAFE and the university piece. And I think a TAFE equivalent for India is definitely more needed and immediate, because we've got a lot of safety related issues that happen because of people getting into the industry without any regulations of who and what they can do. So having been a graduate of a university kind of education and done those mountaineering courses, I think, at least for India, we need a TAFE.
Fantastic comments. I'll throw to Michael Townsend. He's messaged me directly if you'd like to throw into the conversation at this point.
No worries. Thanks, Dave. And firstly, hey everyone, this is my first time here, so yeah, great to be here. So a little bit about me. So 10 years ago, I went through the TAFE system and then have worked in the outdoor industry for the last 10 years and have now gone back to university and studying outdoor ed at La Trobe. And I guess the discussion as to TAFE versus uni, and this is, I can guess only speak for myself, but at a time of my life when I thought that university was not for me, you put it on a pedestal and think, yeah, I'm just not academically minded. So I went towards the TAFE system and still got to a point where there was a career that I could have followed in the outdoor industry, but have now gone back to, I guess, to uni as a mature age student. And although I am drawing things from that, it is just a pathway for me to get my master's. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is some people gravitate towards that hands-on learning, and some will gravitate more towards that kind of theory, place-based pedagogy and stuff like that. So if I can, I guess, emphasize, I think both or definitely have their place in the industry.
Thanks very much, Michael. It's great to see people like myself. I've done the TAFE pathway myself for the diploma course many years ago through OEG in Swinburne, and I'm struggling to finish my university degree through Glenn's program up here on the Sunshine Coast, but that's all on me, not on Glenn. I'm going to throw to Aaron. He's made a fantastic comment in the chat all about the pathways. Aaron, you want to extend on that?
Yeah, it really comes down to a few things. So when it comes to choosing where you want to go with your career, the first is thinking about if you want to be in a school or working for a third-party organisation. So a school in Victoria would require a teacher to have at least 8 units to be able to qualify for that, for VCE teaching. And so that would be a big factor in deciding which pathway you'd want to go, if you're going down the RTO, if you're going to go down the TAFE or the university. Whereas in Queensland, outdoor ed's not an authority subject. And so for a teacher to get a qualification as an outdoor leader, it requires them to go back to TAFEs, even if they hold, an equivalent or very similar degree, or at least it was up until a few years ago when the USC program started up. So, there's I think it's a lot of this is to do with the state system, with where we want to end up working. And then the other thing to think about is just in terms of the additional qualifications as well. So doing courses, short courses through organisations like ACIA, PACI, or Australian Canoeing is going to be upskilling and ongoing training as well, which is not recognised by the vocational units, although I think PACI's an RTO.
I might bring the conversation back, and again, it's a fluid conversation as it always is in the Outhaus, to the question we had, number 2 there. Does the current tertiary sector in all its facets actually deliver work-ready staff? And I'd love to hear from some of the young people in the room who are younger than me, which is everyone, who are currently going through the pathway for the first time, and how they're seeing their future, perhaps. I'm looking at you, Mads.
Yeah, well, I go to VU, and we're fortunate enough to have the option of completing an internship major with VU, and they have a partnership going on with OEG, which I think is a really great opportunity because it allows us to go through, do the subjects, develop the hard skills and soft skills at uni in specific subjects. And then we can go on in our second year to work and then reflect on our work and then develop our professional practice from there. So I think that in particular is really good. And there's been research, I actually think Glyn might be one of those people that did it with Brendan Munge. They identified that there was a gap in uni students finishing uni without enough experience, essentially getting thrown in with a group and just not really having too much of an idea how to deal with an actual group that isn't just your peers. And so I think that program kind of considered that research, and I think it's going really well from my perspective. I think it gives a lot more people insight. I think that not all programs are necessarily doing that, but I think that the diversity of the field sometimes is a bit hard to target specific outcomes, because you can go on, you can do outdoor leadership, or you can go on and do outdoor education. And those are two very, very different fields of expertise. I actually did a year of the course at USC, and it wasn't quite for me because I didn't want to go on and be a teacher, which I found, which is why I moved to VU. But that said, if you want to be a teacher, then it's a good option as well. So there's still diversity even in like doing uni degrees, which is quite interesting.
Kelly, jump in there.
Thanks. It's actually Graham, not Kelly.
Ah, sorry, Graham. Yeah.
I am here though.
She's here as well, but thanks. So it's interesting what you say there, Mads, about the degree, and I'm familiar with the study you're talking about. For example, we have a staff member who conducted a degree in outdoor leadership, I think it is, at La Trobe a couple years back now, graduated a couple years back. And he actually finds it frustrating that he can't find decent work as a leader in the industry because his skills aren't recognizably transferable to the industry saying we want you to have a Cert 4 or a Cert 3. However, when you look at the actual nuts and guts of what he studied in the degree, there's definitely transferable skills that are there. And I don't understand why people have got their head in the sand about he doesn't have a Cert 4 in bushwalking, but he has a degree in, you know, outdoor education / recreation. So while he didn't go down the teacher path, he did go down the outdoor space. In saying that, I think the way we can potentially get around this is by having more guidance for young people going into university, into TAFE, into find out what they actually want to do and what they want to achieve from their degree or their, so that they can be pointed in a little bit better direction. So that's probably, from what I see here in Queensland, that's where I think we should go, a little bit more guidance to our industry to help these people decide, do I want to go down the path of a TAFE or an RTO and getting my hard skills up and then practicing my trade craft, and then maybe later going to university to practice the pedagogy and all that the other side of it and the management side of it? Or do they don't want to do that part and they just want to be a group leader and just deal with people in the field, which I think is something that as an industry, we may need to look at the way we promote ourselves, particularly at the RTO, TAFE, or university level. I know, Glyn, you've got your hand up, so you've probably got something to say as well, mate. So over to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't have to be the first to speak, but certainly I think recently universities have acknowledged that it's been hard for employers to compare the capabilities of university graduates versus vet graduates, and it's an easier task for vet graduates because there's a national outdoor recreation training package, whereas universities don't have a set common curriculum across all universities in Australia. So we are at the moment resolving that by trying to identify the threshold concepts in outdoor education, which will go some way to providing more clarity about what university graduates are capable of doing. But to be honest with you, I've always, in my 20 plus years working in universities, been able to write a reference for graduates which explains what they're able to do. And it's a shame that I have to speak vet speak to be understood, but I'm prepared to do that for students. And I've never had a student come back to me and say, oh, the employer is still insisting that I have to have a Cert 4 or a diploma, a vet qualification. So I think there are certainly ways around the challenge that Graham's just described. And I think the university sector is more aware that they need to be part of the solution to help their graduates to be able to articulate the things that they are able to do in the future.
Glenn, can I just add to what you're saying there too? You know, obviously I'm in a very similar situation to yourself with graduates that are sort of heading out there and sometimes facing these blocks from employers. And I guess what I've found in some ways is a lot of it comes down to the graduate being able to explain what it is that they have done at university to the employer. You know, an example is having two separate graduates going to an employer and one being able to quite articulately explain, this is what I've done at university, this is how it actually matches up against, you know, the competency-based information that you're looking at, and then being quite successful in getting the role. But then another potential student going to the same employer, not being able to be very articulate about it and not getting the role. So to me there, the issue is actually the employer's understanding and the employer's, I guess, need to relate everything to vet speak, as you know, to use your language, Glenn. And that's the language that they're used to using. So in some ways, I think there needs to be better communication to employers, and that's a lot of the research I think that, you know, Glenn's working on at the moment, so that they can actually start to assimilate the tasks they require within their organisation with the educational outcomes that someone from a tertiary institution is actually bringing into their organisation. I think that's where a lot of the issue sits, is with the actual employers of the organisations.
It's a lovely segue, Matthew, to the fourth question I've just posted in the chat room there. I think David's got a comment though, and then Wally had a nice comment in the chat if he'd like to speak to that as well. But David first, perhaps. Mr. Chitty.
Sorry, I wasn't sure there was another David. I mean, I'm only a small organisation. I have 13 or 14 casuals. I mean, I've always employed and still employ around competence, experience and leadership skills that we field test people on before we then train them in our own systems, so that they can fit into our work. Probably the last thing we've looked at over the years is what qualification someone has. I mean, I just employed a ski school director, young, a little tiny ski school, and she's actually got an outdoor education degree, just finished it. But I would have employed her even if she hadn't had the degree, because it's her ski competence and experience and her ability to deal with groups that I'm employing her for. So it's sort of interesting. I'd like to be able to use the qualifications a bit better, but currently it's probably something I look at, but it's certainly not something I rate as highly as what people can actually do. That's the critical thing for a small player like me.
Wally, did you want to elaborate on your comment from the chat?
Yeah, just briefly. Wally from Homesland TAFE. You know, the training package was, it's been out for about 18 months now, the new one, and even prior to that, you know, you have chats with industry partners and, you know, what do you want to have out of a graduate? And they say, you know, canoeing, bushwalking and all this, but that's all they kind of understand. They think they're going to get a canoe person, they're going to get this, but people come and say, let's do it, let's get RPL. You know, I can canoe, I can mountain bike, I can do whatever, but they don't understand there's so much underpinning knowledge that they actually have to, you know, demonstrate. It's always little things that they don't understand how you unpackage a unit, how you write an assessment, and well, why do you need 56 observational checks on an assessment? So, you know, I think, you know, moving forward, there needs to be a hell of a lot of conversation with the industry about what the vocational, what we do, and what is, you know, well, I shouldn't say an end product, but it will be what a graduate would look like, because there's also a hell of a lot more work that the industry have to put into this basic product, it's called a product, after someone's gone through a TAFE qualification.
Anybody got any comments on that?
Just to add to what Wally said there, David, is the training package it goes out to a bunch of expert working groups and they give us feedback on what they want that end product to be. And then it goes through a few different stages and then we get what the training product is now. And then myself and Wally, whoever works in it, TAFE has to implement that and then try and meet all that criteria. But I think there's a bit of a disconnect from what the experts working groups say at the very beginning coming from industry. And as it goes through a process, it might start to get more and more complex. So the framework that we work with is different from, or it has a lot more complexities in there in regards to legislation and funding and staffing and whatnot. And then the complexities coming from how we implement that at the end and putting someone through to get that graduate experience the experts want. And then, oh, sorry, I've gone off topic again, but all of the different complexities in there make it really hard for us to sometimes meet that package requirement.
And I'll just say one more thing, please. Who would pay $22,000 to do a certificate in outdoor leadership? 10,000? So that's one of the issues that the TAFE sector is facing. The funding that we can't. We've got these battles in front of us, but if you're a year 12 student who are looking at a TAFE or a university degree, $22,000, that's halfway to a degree type of thing, isn't it? So that's just a barrier and another debate for another time.
I know I got mine for probably less than $3,000 back in the day, but that's when there was a lot of funding. I'll just come back to the chat again. Rob Gallagher had a point about TAFE is the ideal at the moment in promotion to school leavers. I just wanted to draw the attention, and Dom might chip in here if he's got any other comments. Outdoors New South Wales are currently proactively promoting the outdoor community and the outdoor employability profession, I guess, as a location for school leavers going into classrooms of year 11s and 12s. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, Rob, and their program that they just kicked off in the last month. No? Okay. Maybe after the conversation, I can connect you with Laurie or through Dom. Dom, you got anything about that?
Yeah, it's a program that Laurie's been working on. Andrew Knight in Outdoors Vic is doing a similar thing with secondary students, trying to, that's about promoting the outdoor sectors as a career path. It's something that we've tried to do as well in Queensland and trying to get that on the radar. I think a lot of this is, sometimes vet in school courses can be seen as a course for kids who aren't going to achieve academically, so they do an outdoor recreation course. And I think we're trying to shift that perception and trying to make it into that kids see that they, if they've done it, even if they do a Cert 2 in outdoor rec, that's already a part completion of Cert 3 or Cert 4, and they can go on to other things in the outdoor sector. So that qualification, even though it mightn't get them a job straight away, it can lead to other things. But the other one I did put in the chat, it's a little bit off topic, but Fitness Australia has been working with the exercise physiology uni courses, and they've actually got a process in place where they've mapped it and they'll qualify a student that they might have done half of a degree, and they say, right, you are now fully qualified as a trainer, as a personal trainer, and you can work for the rest of your degree. You can work forever, I suppose, as a trainer, because they're saying, well, you've already got the qualifications and it's some sort of equivalence. And it's a pretty interesting process that they've done. It works because they've got a strong accreditation process in place that Fitness Australia does. But it's another interesting thing. And I think what Glyn said about the threshold concepts, that's the only way that works. If all the unis have some consistency across the uni courses that are being delivered so that it can be mapped against that. And maybe, I'm not saying the first 2 years of uni are directly equivalent to a Cert 4 or another qual, but it's a way of meaning that people automatically have that qual before they come out and not have to do, like Cherie mentioned in the chat, go back and do a Cert 4 in outdoor leadership after you've got a degree and you've already got your Cert 4 in training and assessment. Like, for goodness sake, it seems like what are you going to find out next that you need? It's like, it just goes on and on. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting process that Fitness Australia has done, and they're doing that deliberately to try to bring those people from uni into the workforce straight away, so that they can get some runs on the board, I guess, and practical experience while they're at uni.
Don, that's something that we've looked at VU quite a bit, sort of picking up on something Ben was saying earlier about a pathway from TAFE through to university. Obviously, that the Australian Qualifications Framework, there's a crossover between diploma level studies and bachelor's degree that sits at AQF level 5, because the first year of a bachelor's degree generally sits at AQF level 5, which is also diploma level from the vet sector. So, at VU, if I've got someone that's applying with a diploma of outdoor rec, then they will basically go straight into second year of the degree, or there'll be some similar equivalency of a year's worth of study based on the units that they have actually undertaken in their TAFE studies. Because I'm really keen to get that type of pathway and I guess throughput for people to recognise what it is that they've already done and how that contributes to where they're trying to go to. And I think that type of mapping needs to happen more often to actually allow that transition to happen more effectively. And I know, like at VU, we're a dual sector university, but to try and get the two sides of the coin to actually play nicely is just so difficult. So in some ways, it's forcing us to go outside to start to look at other options outside of our own institution, because they don't want to make that transfer easy.
David, you want to jump in with a comment?
Yeah, and when what Don was talking about, we really should look at what other professions and trades and industries do with their education systems. Yeah, I mean, one that I'm familiar with, of course, is the military. So yeah, if a young person wants to become an army officer, which is a bit higher level than maybe a leader, but you can do a 12-month course at Duntroon and come out as a lieutenant. You can go and do I think it's 4 years at ADFA and come out with a degree plus your 12 months military training. And as lieutenants, they get the same pay, same responsibility, same roles, but the degree person is the one that moves through to become senior staff officers, generals, and run the place at the end of the day. So the 12-month course is aimed at people maybe getting as far as lieutenant colonel. Yeah, but you can get more platoon commanders through your 12-month course to fill your army up than you can. You don't need as many senior officers. And look, other industries probably look at various courses and better university degrees, in-house training in different ways. We could perhaps learn some good stuff.
Thanks, David. I'll reference the last burning question we had, as we're getting close to the top of the hour and our people start to ebb away for dinner and family commitments. And it's a bit of an old school question. I got picked up by Glenn online this afternoon about, are the right soft skills, which is a very old and antiquated term, being taught again across the sector. So in that, I should refer to interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. Anyone got a comment or an opinion?
I'll just say I think the soft skills are the hardest ones, David, in your defence.
I just can't call them soft skills, I'm told, anymore. There's no such thing as a soft skill. Aaron?
Dave, I think these skills take the longest to develop, and it's hard to, you can introduce them, you can train them in whatever vocational or higher education, but it's through practice and experience and reflection that they're going to be developed.
So, Zarad?
Yeah, I don't think they're being taught, at least not in the master's program or the graduate diploma program. I do think that definitely need it, because regardless of whether you join a university as somebody who wants to teach, or a school, or you're in the field and working with children or corporate training, whatever it is, you need it, and it's not being taught. So instead of it being an elective subject like some sort of psychology, whether it's child psychology or it's behavioral science or something, needs to be part of one of the core units rather than the elective units. So, you know, for instance, I took counseling skills as an elective unit. I really felt that that was for anybody who's working with children in the outdoors, needed a basic level of CBT understanding. So I think it should be part of core units. Thanks.
I'll chip in from my perspective, trying to complete a bachelor's at 48. I'm finding it really difficult to find subjects that are relevant to my field, my chosen field being outdoor professional. And whilst I've looked at counselling subjects, it's very much, yeah, as if you're going towards a vocation as a counsellor, not tasked or not shaped for my industry. And I think maybe the industry struggles with that just a little bit, and that affects our ability to become more professional and to have that. Anyone else felt that or seen that?
I feel like this is especially important to people that are entering the field or entering qualifications, especially straight out of school, because they don't have the same amount of years experience like in just dealing with people and like developing understanding. I also think that in our field, you know, we have the potential to put people in really uncomfortable environments, places that they haven't been in before. So that's already going to create heightened awareness alongside the heightened experience, alongside the fact that, like, you know, so many more people now are experiencing a lot more anxiety and like mental health issues, or like struggling with management of mental health things. And I think that a lot of leaders aren't equipped from a professional side of things to give like proper management tools to those students to be able to assist them in those moments. And especially if you're not at like a hard top camp, or if you're not, you know, in somewhere where another person with more experience can really be there to directly help you, you're kind of flying solo, which can actually create a bit of a uncomfortable experience for like the student. Maybe, you know, you can try your best, but you're not always going to choose the right thing straight away. So my suggestion that I just popped in the chat was, I think that something that all of us should have is mental health first aid. I've seen so many young people have panic attacks on programs, which I feel fine dealing with coming from a background in youth work, but I can't imagine, you know, people who don't have any idea how to deal with any sort of anxiety, how they would manage that. That would be like quite stressful from a leading perspective. Thoughts?
Is anyone encompassing those type of mental health elements or courses in their existing curriculum?
There's an interesting lady, I can't think of her first name, whether it was Mandy, but she works at Torrens University. Second name's Baker, and she did the effective abilities for outdoors leaders stuff that David Strickland from Sport and Recreation Victoria paid for. And she's done a lot of work in this area, yeah, and has been involved with Laurie at Outdoors New South Wales a bit, yeah. I think she's coming to the Outdoor Education Conference and speaking. And it could be worthwhile getting her on to talk at this venue in a future time, because she's got some really cool ideas about the soft skills, as we might call them, you know, mental health things, all the other things we need as outdoor leaders that we're possibly not training formally or even informally at the moment.
I think there was it was mentioned, I brought it up as a bit of a topic last Friday in the Outdoors New South Wales and Outdoors Queensland sessions. Highly recommended. Big plug there to Dom Courtney and his bi-weekly session to catch up on stuff in Queensland in the outdoors. But there actually are two providers that I'm aware of that do mental health first aid. Dom can correct me. I think it's not Royal Life, it's St. John's, was it, Dom? Or
yeah, I'm not sure. I think Red Cross do a psychological first aid, and that's a little bit different. But yeah, we actually had a guest from Parkinson's Queensland last week, and she suggested that we might want to talk to them about maybe they apparently will personalised a course for that sort of thing. So she suggested maybe we should talk to them. And she used to work at Volunteer in Queensland and has a lot of contacts there. So I might be having a few conversations and see what we can't get out of that. Because, yeah, and I just shared, it was Mandy Baker. I just shared a link to her publication from Torrens, David. So I popped that in the chat.
Rob, do you want to speak to your comment just now in the chat about mental health first aid? Always love putting people on the spot.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. My connection here is pretty laggy with satellite, but just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Great, thank you. Yeah, so I've worked in outdoor ed for a few years, and initially through my TAFE and uni combined course, didn't really touch on mental health or mental illnesses in any way. I think there may have been a brief mention in wilderness first aid, but what I found, as Mads pointed out, is that mental health issues present so frequently, particularly in young people, but also in the work I've done with adults. And, you know, often when we're out there, particularly on expeditions, but also in any hardtop camp environment, we're so frequently working with young people who are pushed, you know, to the edge of their comfort zone, if you will. I'm not a subscriber to that model, but they're uncomfortable, and that's when some of these things just come up. People get to a bit of a breaking point, and I've seen instances where that's been handballed off to a teacher who's not necessarily equipped to deal with that, particularly when they're already uncomfortable in that context, in that setting. But also I've seen it sort of fobbed off as a, oh, we can deal with that later, without the understanding that even the early stages of a mental health crisis can be really critical, just as important as a first aid incident. I think it's, yeah, absolutely important that crucial that we have that training.
Something I mentioned in the chat is that the idea that we don't necessarily, because I saw that there is this idea of burning out students, and that's fully, that's a really good point, that, you know, if you try to shove too much into a program, that you can burn people out, and then you don't retain as much information. So maybe it's a shorter course, because I did a mental health first aid at one of my past work experiences, and it was, I think it was a 1 or 2 day course. So even something as little as that can make a difference, probably, and help people feel better prepared to deal with those situations, or at least to have an idea of what to do. Because before that, a lot of people they wouldn't know how to handle it at all. So I think even a short course would be very beneficial as a requirement.
I might pivot back. Rob's still looking for some answers in the chat about the earlier question. Rob, do you want to talk to that comment? I don't think we ever get to answers here in the Outhaus. We just pose a lot of questions and hope to have an ongoing discussion. Rob, you're on mute, mate. If you want to share, there you go.
Yeah, thanks. I had that, Rob. All right, go ahead.
Rob Gallagher.
Yeah, no, just a generic one. As I say, we've got a local business chamber or business groups, you know, anywhere between caravan parks and boat sheds and other that is just in need of workers. I mean, the park managers or greenkeepers and the like, cleaners even for caravan parks. It's just sort of a struggle, as it is probably everywhere. So it's just generic. We've sort of been working, trying to get TAFE, or I've been researching those training providers, as you say, but whether there's any courses as far as Victoria or Queensland that can be operated regionally, or, you know, with an organisation backing, whether it be the business chamber or our little association, if, you know, Be interested to know.
Dom, you want to speak to that? Different state, but
yeah, different state. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, and you know, there's all sorts of opportunities for different training and different qualifications out there. So I was just looking at the chat too, and like Mads has just flagged the cultural competency and understanding that there's so many different courses that, and I've just put in there in the chat too, like, is it you go and pick on what you actually need for the clientele that you expect to be dealing with. But the problem for students particularly, I think, is you don't necessarily know where you're going to end up. And, you know, it's an ongoing process, and it's that development. And I don't think there's ever a spot. You know, I think almost at the moment, and maybe it's not just at the moment, maybe it is, the outdoor sector is a place for lifelong learners. And that's something that you almost have to embrace and go, this isn't going to be the same. Like, I'm pretty sure, David, when you started in the outdoor sector, you didn't think, you know, as you said just before, soft skills is now a different term. We know what you meant, but those sort of things, those skills are actually really needed, and they're also needed in different environments, and you need to pick and choose a bit.
Dom, if I can just jump back to the AQF again. A bachelor's degree is about having broad and coherent knowledge and skills for professional work. So it's not actually until you get to the next couple of levels up, you know, sort of a master's degree, where it's talking about specialised knowledge. So a bachelor's degree is actually designed to provide a broad base of knowledge on which you can then choose to specialise on. So maybe there's some structural concepts there that need to sort of start to be thought through in terms of that educational progression. Is it's all right, well, the bachelor's degree is where I go if I want that broad knowledge for my professional development. But then if I go, well, this is actually what I want to specialise in, then there needs to be some, you know, AQF level 8 or 9 options appearing that allow people to specialise in certain areas or certain sectors of the outdoor industry as a whole. And that may be able to solve some of those problems.
Yeah, but I don't know that it's always you got to get to having a PhD in interpersonal communications. It might just be that you need the mental health first aid course to deal with people. If that's the clientele that a particular organisation expects their staff to be dealing with, and to be dealing with it well, maybe the employer invests in that course for their staff, rather than expecting the staff to necessarily turn up with every single possible piece of paper that you could have. You know, it's exactly like if I say, I'm going to have a hovercraft, so I expect every one of my staff to turn up with a hovercraft ticket. You know, let's be a little bit real about this. What's a realistic expectation for staff to turn up with on day one? And what do I as an employer expect to train people? And I think a lot of employers are happy to do the training, because then they know that people are good. And that's what most employers want. They want good staff who can do the job. So I think it's probably an indication of the amount of training that employers deliver and facilitate as well, maybe.
That is a great point, considering that, like, then it can be targeted towards the specific groups that you're going to be working with. Dom, I suppose the only issue, like, with that is, you know, if like I work for OEG, so, you know, is OEG going to put their hundreds of staff, all of them, through mental health first aid training and cultural competency training? Or are they able to buy a package and put it as at least their online training modules? Good questions to sort of.
Kelly.
Okay, just to go back to your point, Mads, about that cultural, there is so many different cultures. Like, every one of us sitting in the room, we're all in different regions. Like, Dom's in one region, we're down south from him at the moment, we're in a different region, Dave's in a different region. Every one of those cultures don't cross over. That is one of the biggest problems in this country, is that there are so many different cultures within each clan that we can't really do it. It needs to be tribal and specific to the area that you're working in at the time.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
On that. But there's also, I just shared in the chat, there's a link to AI Access, which is a government organisation, but it's core cultural learning course. It's an online course. Quite a few of the Outdoors Queensland staff did it in the last couple of years, and some of our board members. And it's an overview. It's not trying to be this is what it's like at this particular spot, but it's a really good, it's all online modules, but it encourages you to dig deeper into the area that you work as well with the traditional owners of a particular area. So it's worth a look, and it's actually not super expensive too, which is something that we certainly appreciated as a non-profit.
See, one of the other things we guess we have to have a look at with a high level of training, years and spent in degrees or diplomas, courses and things, is how much does the leader or the employee actually get paid for all this? Yeah. So we've got to be realistic. We're not the best paying industry in the world as yet. Yeah? I mean, I employed people at what I would call about a level 3, certificate 3. That's probably what I'm looking for. And I pay $350 a day for a casual. Yeah. But if someone, if someone's got a lot of other courses, should I be paying them more? Is that something that benefits my business? How do we orchestrate that? I'm probably heading towards $400 a day within the next 18 months to 2 years. That's what I reckon I should be paying, but I've got to put my prices up and move things slowly. But that's still not a lot of money for a casual employee.
Thanks, David, and thank you very much, everybody. We're always respectful of people's time, especially on a Monday night, to do other things with your evening. We really appreciate your feedback and your contribution to what was obviously a very popular and trending topic. We, again, thought we'd get 5 people in the room tonight. We've had 30 here. So we takeaways from tonight, I guess, for me would be there's an ongoing conversation that needs to be had at a national level, and it's complex and will be involving more than one Zoom meeting. I'd just like to acknowledge Matthew Cox from Victoria down there for leading us off there with some interesting perspectives, and from Ben Craddock from representing and waving the flag from the TAFE sector, and all the RTOs in the room, and everybody else who's been here, including our newest friends from India. We love to hear from you. We'll stop the recording now, and have a great week, last week of term, if that's what you're doing, and have a great holiday break. We'll be back again the first Monday in July. Would you believe that? So stay warm. We'll stop the recording, but feel free to hang out and chat.